Is it true that titles have officially left K-pop, or is this just outrage? But wouldn't it really be that bad if titles disappeared altogether? I believe that titles have been an integral part of K-pop community for a very long time. I mean, think about it. No other fandom really uses titles to the extent that K-pop does. It's one aspect of K-pop that has been very unique to K-pop. How many times am I going to say K-pop in just the intro? But anyways, I can't be the only one who has been seeing certain titles kind of disappearing in newer groups, such as there hasn't been this definitive leader title being used as frequently, nor are companies really telling us who are the main rappers, main dancers, main vocalists. It's kind of left for the audience's interpretation. And it makes me wonder, what does this say about K-pop now? And if it has caused a lot of changes, or if it really has been a change that has come and gone and hasn't really left a mark. And if this is a good thing also, like, will this stop more hate or more controversy, or will this cause more problems? I just kind of want to delve into it in my opinions. What I find very interesting is that the first title that I saw disappear was the leader title, which I thought was very interesting because it had been such a staple within K-pop. The leader is essentially the person who is responsible or shares more responsibility of maintaining the group and making sure they're successful. And the leader is usually, naturally, either the oldest member or the one with the most training experience. So I think this makes sense because you do need a level of maturity and understanding of what the company wants and what the industry wants from you to be able to complete your duties as a leader to the best of your ability. However, I do believe that the disappearance of the leader title is way more beneficial than it is harmful. The leader title is essentially a lot of responsibility to put onto an idol. Not only do they have to focus on what their role is in the team outside of being the leader, but then as the leader, they have to be responsible of the team and also the team's success. And I don't think that's a reasonable amount of pressure to put onto somebody. I also think having this hierarchy where one person is leader and the rest have to follow them can cause a lot of strain within the relationship that are being formed within the group. For example, when I think of how this can negatively affect somebody is with the Mina and Jimin situation from AOA, in which Jimin was the leader and she was told that she was responsible for the team. And she then has to play an antagonistic role towards Mina in which she reprimands her. And Mina took it the wrong way, essentially. And we saw how that spiraled and how that pressure that they put on Jimin for her to be responsible of the team's well-being made it so she couldn't have this positive relationship with her teammates when they're supposed to be working together and forming bonds so they can perform to the best of their abilities. Another case when I think the leadership role had negative effects was with Bang Chen and Stray Kids, in which he was told he was responsible of the team's success, essentially. And, that amount of pressure is damaging even for someone who has a healthy mental state. I cannot imagine how much pressure that is for someone who is living in an idle life, which is already a very stressful job. I also just don't think that's fair to put all that pressure onto one person when the team is not just the group that is the idol group, but also everyone else who's working to ensure that this group is successful, whether that be the director, the managers, the crew and staff. All of them are responsible for making sure that the team's success, and all of them want for the team's success too. It's not only the leader who should be facing all this pressure. And I think that's where the problem lies. Rather than sharing this responsibility and this burden of ensuring success for the team, instead put on the leader to essentially take up all this pressure. And what I think would be much more healthier is if it's shared within the team. Not only does it strengthen the bond of the group, which you want to happen so they perform better, but also it makes the group stronger, essentially, when everyone else has the same drive for success, which I'm sure they do have the same drive, but I don't think it's the same as someone who's been put in the leadership position when they're basically told, this is your responsibility, if you know what I mean. So I do think overall it is much better to have everyone on equal footing and have everyone essentially share the responsibility of, success and leadership, where everyone's responsible for their own actions and their own duties as an idol, rather than making it one person's responsibility to ensure that everyone is behaving at their utmost best behavior. The next roles I want to talk about are the talent roles, I like to call them. So that would be the leads, mains, and subs for vocal, dance, and rap. I think they can all be categorized as just talent based, because I don't think there's much difference in how they work besides like distribution, dance breaks, and lines. I'm not that interested in those differences as much as I am in the title themselves. So why are they disappearing? Like, it feels like such a objective thing to categorize, where it wouldn't cause that much drama, where you do have someone who is the best vocalist, and you can say the same for rap, and you can say the same for dance. So why are they disappearing when there should be such a straightforward thing? I think the reason they're disappearing is because they might cause more problems than they cause positives. Because when you have a main vocalist, then line distribution becomes much easier to justify and talk about. The same with like dance, you know why someone got a dance break while someone else didn't, and why someone got the focus more. And with rapping, the same. You know why someone has got the rap solo. However, not every song distribution is as easily explained as just who has the best qualities for it. When sometimes a lead vocalist has more lines than a main vocalist, or a main rapper has less lines than the lead rapper, or why someone who is not the main dancer got the dance break. So now you have these complicated decisions that whoever the director has decided, or the producers have decided, and the distributions that the producers have made now don't coincide with what the audience knows about the members, and this can cause a lot of friction. This can cause a lot of internal fan wars between solo stands too. However, if we leave these titles to the audience to decide themselves, or to not even think about, then these distributions can be left up to interpretation. Rather, instead of being like, oh, why didn't the main vocalist get the most lines? You can be like, oh, well, this member suits this song better than the others. Or these two dancers are just as good as each other, but they dance this style better. And the same with rap. And it becomes way more, who gets chosen for certain things becomes less objective and more subjective, which is what music is. So I do believe the omission of these titles has more to do with getting people off the producers' backs and stopping as much complaints as before. And also stopping any like rivalries within groups, which I don't think is impossible, but I do think this might minimize it. I'm not sure if it really does, but hopefully, we will see less of it as these titles kind of fade away. So now I want to talk about the Maknae title. So the Maknae title is one I don't think will ever disappear, because in any group, there is going to be the youngest, as there's the oldest, and as there's a person right in the middle. It's just not something that you can make disappear. I mean, of course, you can try to get all members born the same day on the same year, but even then, I think people would find who was born last during the day and make them the Maknae. So it really isn't something we can truly erase, even though I do think it has the worst consequences for the idols, or one of the worst consequences for the idols. I don't want to be too dramatic. So in a society like Korea, in which hierarchy within age or about age is super important, in which ageism is a huge thing, I don't think the Maknae title is going to ever lose its relevancy. An interesting phenomenon that happens is that the youngest member is also way more sexualized and fetishized than the other members. I think the most recent case I can think of is like Nikki from ENHYPEN, who is extremely problematic because, if I'm not mistaken, he's only stopped being a minor as of recently, like maybe a year or two. So for the majority of his like idol career, he has been sexualized by fans as being he's the sexy one. And I think that's just so wrong. And I think there needs to be like this larger conversation of how young boys in K-pop have been sexualized and how there's not a lot of conversation around it. I'm not saying this doesn't happen to young girls, but I think we clock it so much faster when it's a young girl being sexualized. And when it comes to boys, it's kind of like, oh, well, they're inherently more sexual, or like they don't mind being sexual. It's like that's unacceptable, even if that were true, but it's not true. So there's no justification of why these boys are treated this way. And another phenomenon is that the youngest member, when they go to do solo stuff, I've seen this happen, is like they will have the most overtly sexual concepts. And I don't know if this is to detach themselves from the Maknae image, or if it's just because they have been so sexualized for such a long time that this is just so natural to them. I don't know which one it is, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's both. Like the two examples I can think of is Lisa and Jungkook, which I don't think them, like they're adults now. I don't think them like making more sex-based content, or not sex-based content, but like, well, it's not like they're making porn or anything, but it's, having a focus on being sexy is not a bad thing, especially because they're older and they have control over what they do in their bodies. I have no problem with it. I'm just saying it's an interesting phenomenon that the youngest ones are the most overtly sexual, or that's a tendency I see. I think the big problem about Maknaes is that not only of the sexualization, but also the strain it can cause in a group when one member is forced to be like more subservient than the others. And I just think that's like not a problem per se, but like one complication that comes from the ageism in Korea, in which the younger person needs to serve the older person and kind of be complacent towards them in some senses. And I do feel like some people can really abuse that, and in such a high stress situation as K-pop, it can really exacerbate certain situations. And yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to talk about the Maknae position because it's just something that is so prevalent in K-pop. And if we're talking about titles, you can't really ignore it, even though I don't think it's something that will go away, at least not anytime soon. So for the last title that I think of importance is center and visual. And I'm putting these two together, even though I know that there are some centers that aren't visuals. Usually they do come in tandem. So the reason why I feel like this visual is kind of disappearing, well, I don't think it really is disappearing, but why I do feel like it should disappear is just how subjective beauty is. Even with the this rigid KBS standards, right? Even then, like who the Korean public likes may not even be the visual of the group or the one who fits the Korean beauty standard to the T. Like for an example I can think of is with two examples I can think of is actually two it girls. Jennie from Blackpink, who despite not being the visual of the group, that being Jisoo, she was the one who was, really applauded and celebrated for her visuals. And the same thing with Sohyun from AOA, even though she wasn't the visual of the group, she was still celebrated for her appearance, more so than the visual was. And I think that goes to show that even with like the strict KBS or Korean beauty standard, beauty will always be subjective no matter what. And I think with the more globalization of K-pop, this is going to be even more prevalent, with like the beauty standards around the world are just way different than they are if it was, isolated to one market only, because the beauty standards in Japan are different from the beauty standards in the US, and the beauty standards in the US are different from the ones in like Brazil, and so on and so on. So, who is a visual here might be different from who is a visual in someplace else. Therefore, having one person hold that mantle just doesn't make sense, especially when when it's such a prerequisite for idols to be beautiful. I also feel like having a visual position is so damaging for the idol self-esteem. I mean, not only is it like damaging for the other members who don't get chosen as a visual, it's like, oh, am I not pretty enough? Or, are my visuals lacking in some way? But also for the person who gets chosen as a visual, it'd be like, is this all I bring to the table? I think of like Chewy, who gets told frequently that, she's just a visual. And I don't think that's fair for the idol who worked hard to own their talents and such on, to be just boxed into this one position that really doesn't have much to do with their own skills. with the center, which is usually the face of the group too, which usually is the visual, but more on the roles of what a center is meant to do, which is to essentially be the center of the photos and grabs people attention first. I don't understand. I don't really understand this position, which is because you'd think like, oh, you would mix and match who's the center, or the center would go according to height on what looks better when they all standing together. But that's not always the case. And we can also see how this this can cause tension or even some unsavory consequences, such as with the Wonyoung situation where, as the center, she needs to be, at the center. And because people assume that she was taking that position away from somebody else in the team. However, it's not that she's taking it away from somebody else, it's just her position. But also I remember one time where Hyoyeon from Girls' Generation was talking about how she was never chosen to be a center for their dances. And I think that's ridiculous because she is the main dancer, but because of her appearance not being, at least it was assumed that was because of her appearance and how that really had hurt her feelings even after 10 years. And, I guess I don't know. I hope these two positions are positions that are going to die off as K-pop continues to grow and expand and, learn. I really do hope these become like obsolete and irrelevant positions. So this is the end of my video on titles and whether or not they're disappearing. I don't think they're completely disappearing. I think there's still some groups that religiously document each member's titles and their roles in the group. But I do feel like there's less and less, especially from really pioneering groups in the industry that are avoiding using titles at all, such as like Newjeans. And so, I just thought it was an interesting topic to, really discuss and just to see what my opinions on certain titles are and why I think they should really leave the industry. I'd like to know your opinions, if there's certain titles you think are necessary, and if you think this is a really integral part of essentially the medium of K-pop, and removing it kind of removes a part of what makes it so special and different from other music industries. I'd love to know all of it. So until next time, I guess. Bye!